Hey everybody, so I believe I might be live at the moment. Wow, I guess I am. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, so this is not what the title of the video is. This is like the old title. I'll change this later. Uh, so let me just go online here. There we go. Yeah, so I've been thinking about a bunch of stuff. I've been really busy with work for the last few weeks, so I haven't really had a chance to do any videos or anything, but I thought I would take the opportunity to talk about a couple of things. Basically, what happened is I was looking today through some old photos. It's my son's birthday today. He's 13 years old today, and I got one of those Facebook prompts where it's like telling you, like, "Oh, look, these are some old pictures of your from 10 years ago," which is cool to see those photographs. But in that little batch of photographs, it had another photograph there, which which you may have seen. I'm sure people have seen this. It's a very common photo. I'll just show it here. It's the where's this from? It's like really. I'm not sure what this particular one is, but you'll get it, right? So here's the general image here, right? And so it basically starts at the bottom, and it's like shame. Oh, you can't actually see this on the screen, right? Let me see if I can get this. It's got the blur on it. Let me put it in front of my body. Maybe it will make more sense here. And there's a bit of a delay on the video, so can I get? It's just too bright. Well, you know what? Maybe you're going to be able to understand this. Is that there's like an upside down triangle. You can't see anything here, man. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So that's really a useless form of sharing information. However, I think I can share it here. Let me just see what I can do here. Man, I don't think I'm going to do that because if I do that, I didn't set up properly to show this. Anyway, it's one of these classic upside down triangles, and it's kind of like a spectrum color. So at the bottom it's red, and it talks about shame, then it goes up to despair, fear, anger, pride, courage, optimism, acceptance, wisdom, blah, blah, blah. And it goes all the way up to full enlightenment and full awakening, right? Which is, there's a whole bunch of people who've talked about this kind of understanding of consciousness. And there seems to be some truth in it in some ways. And then that's one map of spirituality, which I think is what I was going to call this video. Um, oh, got a message. Um, yeah. Let me get back to that, Jacob. I've got like something I want to talk about here, but Ormus was huge for me. It was gigantic. Although a lot of people I know who've taken it didn't feel much, but for me it was earth-shattering, the Ormus. At first, the Ormus was an earth-shattering experience. Then after a couple of months, it tapered off into normality. But it was like trans-dimensional for me the first two times I did it. Um, anyway, these maps of spirituality are pretty interesting. So that's one sort of style of map of spirituality. And then another one you might like think of the tree of life, which is a pretty evolved and developed map of something, right? It's a map of something, right? But what's interesting about this is it kind of maps out, like, even though you can't see it here, I wish this was in real time so I could sort of see what I was doing. The even though you can't see what's happening here, I'm going to try and like just turn this around a little bit, see if I can get a little bit of action on this. Wait, maybe I can I lower the light on this? That's not going to help, is it? I doubt it. Let's just see. there. Oh, you can kind of see it at an angle. Let me see. I'm just going to try and see. I've got like a 20-second lag on the video, unfortunately. There you go. Right. So what's going on there, you can see this, is as you get up to the higher points in the upside down triangle, this is like enlightenment up here, and down here is anger and shame. And so what it makes you think that like, oh, I have to like think differently to become enlightened or something like that, right? So it's almost like a qualitative thing. And in some ways, focusing on the tree of life is very similar. In fact, in some mappings of the tree of life, people map the emotions onto the different sephiroth using those ideas. And also with the chakras, right? So in the chakras, we're always talking about the shame and fear and stuff down in the root chakra, and as you go up. So there's these maps of spirituality which all kind of correspond with each other. How amazing. There are some, what they tend not to talk about in those maps is it seems like it's just a sort of linear movement up, but what really needs to happen in those maps is like a sort of alchemical transformation of the energy, right? I'm just going to take some notes here because I had some ideas today about what I wanted to talk about. There we go. And then what happens is, you go online and you forget what you actually want to talk about. I don't think that particular one is David Hawkins, but it's very. I couldn't remember that guy's name. I wanted to mention David Hawkins. So yeah, and that's interesting what you're saying there. That spirituality is about subtracting parts from what don't serve. That's a very common thing to say. I've often said that enlightenment is a destructive process. It's like a cliche now, right? So it's like these are common ideas, right? And so, I mean, part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because it is a very common idea, and it does seem like as you go through this sort of, if you can meditate into these zones of consciousness, then there's a process of transformation. I think there seems to be, in some level, there's like different stages of awareness. So most people are being aware of these emotional states, like from a very sort of human point of view. So they're really being viewed as sort of emotional structures, right? So they're not being viewed as like energy states. They're being viewed as, well, I am very angry, I'm very emotional. So this is very visceral attachment to what those feelings are. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, a lot of times meditating on the on presence, or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't seem like some of those ideas, like all this stuff has got a really valid purpose, I guess, from well-meaning people. But then you look at somebody like Mooji, for example. Now, I'm of the opinion that Mooji is a very good teacher about enlightenment. And I've got mixed feelings about him too, because in some ways, sometimes I think he's operating from this sort of base level of emotional human understanding. But that's actually really useful for people, because that's where most people are at. So I've got some issues with Mooji, but he's a really good teacher. But what's really amazing about Mooji and many other people who are teaching sort of non-duality or enlightenment in the modality of Ramana Maharshi is none of these maps seem like they're relevant, right? Like all these maps can basically just get thrown out. Maybe. I've actually found it really important to go through maps like this, So when I encountered non-duality and this ability to move into it without thinking about any of this stuff, it was it's it's just astonishing. And yeah, so I think people, I guess I'm just trying to make people aware of that. And I also want to explain a few things. Like I often talk about meditation on desire, and I've got a lot of what you might call teachings in this area on meditations on desire. Um, and then that falls under the same kind of problem. Like, why waste your time doing that if it's possible to move into enlightenment through simple conversation, right? Through simple guidance. And so Mooji's got this thing he calls the invitation. I posted it on the community a week ago, but the thing is what happens is, and I find this with people, and it happens to me too. People send me videos to watch and stuff, right? But I'm a busy guy. I've been working my ass off for the last month. Plus, I've got a listening and reading list, which is, half a mile long. So when people suggest stuff to it, I'll have a look, and I'm like, well, I think I know that. Oftentimes I won't listen because I've got other things to do, And that probably happens with me too. I'm posting stuff which I think is really important, but then people are just like, yeah, whatever. But this invitation to Mooji is so good that I'm thinking of I'm thinking about just learning it as a teaching modality, really, because it's so simple. And what's funny about it is when I meditate, even when I'm meditating on desire, it's moving into this. The idea is to move into pure consciousness, right, or pure awareness, right? So even if we're meditating on raw desire, the purpose of that is to move into pure awareness, right? It's not getting caught up in the desire. It's using it as an energetic pivot point. It's like the fuel boosters on the space shuttle, right? To push it out into the space, for lack of a better word, and then eject them, but use the power of that energy, right? So that's what the meditation desire is. It's an energy tool. Somebody contacted me a week ago and asked me to do a transmission. I haven't done a transmission in a while, but I was like, why not? Somebody told me to, well, I was getting messages to do transmissions a year or so ago, so, but I haven't really been doing them. So I thought I'd try it. And so I'm going through this stage of trying to understand, because here's the thing. One, what is a transmission? What is it? Right? And two, how do you give a transmission? How would you do it? So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I was getting messages apparently from Shiva to give transmissions to people. And so these questions were going through my mind, okay, I know I can feel energy, but what is the content and quality of that kind of energy transmission to somebody else? And then also, how might you approach this? Because the nature of my personal work with energy, with Kundalini, is based on desire, which has a couple of qualities. I'm just writing down. No, it's got a couple of qualities. One quality might be that that is highly personal, right? Like people like, maybe if you're in a tantric group and you're working with tantrikas, there's a sort of assumption that things will become sexual or something, right? Um, but that's not really that's not really the point of it. I think some people get caught up in the idea of this great open sex thing, which can be part of it, but that's not the point of it, right? The point is enlightenment is the point, right? Um, so this person contacts me, and we connected to do a transmission, and it was really interesting because she was very evolved in terms of energy awareness, and also understood the concepts I was talking about. So, in terms of the um, the means of transmission, intimacy is the material of transmission. It's the materiality. The How do I say this? Let me see. Oh, it's the medium. Intimacy is the medium of transmission, and this is that's a really deep thing. Well, yeah, I mean it is, and part of my discussion here is really as a sort of a compare and contrast with Mooji, because Mooji, his invitation is, see, I don't really think it's a transmission. He's not really doing a transmission there. He kind of is. What he's kind of doing in his invitation is he's creating a soft intimacy where there's a space of consciousness shared by the listeners, and in that space of friendly calmness, information is shared in which it's a soft, I think it's a soft, diffuse transmission. Um, and I hesitate to call it transmission because transmission implies, seemingly, that somebody is sending energy to you, right? And that whole idea is kind of contrary to the sort of underlying tenets of non-duality, right? Because the whole non-dual idea is that, well, there is no like personality. It's the self communicating with the self, right? The higher self, right? Ramaji also, who's relevant, since Ramaji is the originator of this rasa transmission, which you and I and a bunch of other people partook of, and which changed my life completely. The rasa thing. Um, Really, I mean, Kundalini awakening seemed like there could be nothing more astounding than that. But the rasa, I mean, I guess it's all the same process, but it feels distinctly different. At a certain point, obviously, at some point, this will all just um, uh, coalesce. Jacob's asking, I don't do content and manifestation. Do I utilize the law of attraction? No. Um, I have done content and manifestation in the past. I did a class years ago, and I talked about manifestation, and I had some, I thought, pretty innovative ideas about how to do it. But my ideas of manifestation have changed completely. And I believe, so for example, if you read, what's the big book on this? The original book is that business guy, who everybody mentions him, his book, which he wrote. Um, but they talk about like saying like repeating ideas in your head and repeating, all really interesting. I just don't think that stuff's very effective because it works because it assumes a mechanical structure of the mind, which is really stupid. It's not. It's not really stupid. It's really uninformed, right? If you want to bring good things into your life, the best thing you can do is have a solid prayer or mantra practice. Sincere prayer, sincere devotion to a divinity. That's how you make your life better. There's nothing will compare to that. So the problem I've got with general law of attraction practices is that it assumes a mechanical possibility. It ignores the truth of what's actually happening, right? If you want to make your life better, pray, right? That's my opinion. Um, well, there's a couple of, it depends. It depends where you're at. Like prayer is a great thing to do, or mantra, right? And so for me, mantra is very much like prayer too, because mantras, as everybody knows, like the Kali mantra isn't a mantra to Kali. It's Kali, right? It's Kali. It's ruminating on Kali herself, right? That's what the mantra is. And I've actually been doing a Kali mantra now for the last week or so since that transmission. So I was working with this girl doing a transmission a week ago, and I was leading her through the transmission. And I guess I'll just come out of the closet with this. I think I've spoken about this before, but there's been a bunch of like ideas revealed to me, which I'm calling, I'm putting under the name or the rubric of, I'm calling it the Order of the Jewel, right? It's the Order of the Jewel. And this is a bunch of like, what? Yeah, I feel embarrassed talking about this, but it's basically a name for a bunch of wisdom that's come to me about how to do transmissions and how to work with consciousness. And it's actually kind of interesting because it contrasts very specifically with somebody like Mooji, and it is tantric conceptually, I guess. There's another girl I speak to, and she keeps telling me, well, it's like a cult, really, you know. And I'm like, well, it might be a cult, but I'm really transparent about it, right? So there's no like secrets. There's no there's no there's no abuse of it. So the problem with the Order of the Jewel is that, and the problem with using desire is uh, is a meditation, and the problem with intimacy being the medium of transmission is that when you're trying to explain to somebody how the system works, they feel like you're trying to seduce them. But you're not trying to seduce them. That's just the nature of the material, right? There's the nature of the material is seductive. And like I have no intention of seducing somebody for my own benefit, right? Um, um, it's really about I'm trying to read here at the same time as I'm like trying to form my ideas. So the idea is like to yeah. So the idea, I mean, there is a seductive aspect. The idea is to like engage, is to show people how they can engage with the power structure, their own power structure, right? Jacob's asking, when you talk about prayer, do you mean prayer as in the Christian sense, just asking higher power to give you your desires? Um, it could be. I don't think that's a really good way of. It could be the Christian sense. I'm like fairly positive about Christianity these days. I think it's a totally valid form of communicating with divinity. It's not really my path, I guess, but I like it. I guess I like Christianity. Just because I'm really familiar with it. Like I went to church a lot as a kid and stuff, and I know the Gospels more or less, right? So it's like, I understand it. I think my problem with Christianity is it's very it's 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 just too deep in metaphors. Like if do yourself a favor, anybody who's listening to this, look up W.B. Yeats, W.B. Yeats, the Upanishads on YouTube. So William Butler Yeats was a very famous Irish poet who I was a big fan of, and I didn't realize that he did a translation of the Upanishads. Dude, it's about 3-4 hours long. It is the best thing I have ever listened to. It's amazing. I mean, it's up there. It's almost better than the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, I'd say I think it's more universal maybe than the Bhagavad Gita, because the Bhagavad Gita is more of a narrative between Krishna and Arjuna. Uh, and it takes a while to get into that. Like at first, the Bhagavad Gita didn't really click with me because I'm like, who are these people? Why should I give a shit about this? Whereas now I'm like I'm saturated with the Bhagavad Gita. Hallelujah. But the Upanishads by William Butler Yeats is a great recording of it with some beautiful music in the back, so it doesn't get boring. It's a really good reader. It's beautiful. So my point is that for me, that kind of like the Vedic, the Vedantic view of spirituality to me is just much more direct and beautiful. Now, I think part of the thing which turns a lot of people off from the Bible and Christianity is that there's, especially in the Old Testament, there's a lot of like politics and stuff wound up in here. People are trying to extract meanings out of like ancient politics. It's not to say there's not deeper stuff wound into that. There is, and I think it's valid. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Listen, the Bible. A lot of people poo-poo the Bible, but if you do any serious meditation on any part of the Bible, that will blow up into massive experiences, right? So it's not nothing, right? So you could do prayer in the Christian sense for sure, but I think the main thing is, yeah, and I think what you're asking your higher power to give you your desires. I think what you need to do, Jacob, is, yeah, don't ask for your desires. I think the more important thing to do is, if there's a couple of things. I mean, I get the whole thing about getting your desires, but asking, I don't think it really works. Maybe it won't work, but I think the thing is that the problem is the desires, right? The problem in your life is the desires. That's what the problem is, right? And so the deal with meditation and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita is it ties directly into understanding what is the nature of my desires. Why do I desire these things? That's 1,000 times more valuable than the finest jewelry you'll ever own, I mean, literally, like the thing, the Order of the Jewel, right? It's called the Order of the Jewel, and it's like the jewel. The jewel also is symbolic, right? It's symbolic of a bunch of stuff. And even like Om Mani Padme Hum, that mantra, the Tibetan mantra, that speaks of a jewel, right? What is the jewel? What is it? Now, on a very low level, the jewel could be the seed of life, right? It could be the seed of life, right? On the physical level, that could be semen, right? On the higher level, it could be prana. And what does Mantak Chia? He's always talking about this. The refined, the Taoist guy. He's always talking about refined semen, right? So it's the marrow, the blood, the semen. And so all the energy refines through the body to create this highly refined energy structure, right? Eventually that crystallizes it crystallizes and it appears as a diamond, right? So that's the whole point of working through a map of spirituality, such as the Order of the Jewel, which is probably the most esoteric thing I've ever heard of, right? Um, yeah. Well, this is the thing, Matthias. You know, the thing is this with the, I'm really pleased you're having those experiences, right? Because that's how I am too. Like sometimes in the morning, I'm sitting here, I'm getting ready to work, you know, I'm sitting here, and then it's just this, it's just this field of happiness and joy, right? It's just, and there's no reason for it. It's just saturation of divinity, right? It's just, it's so much more valuable than anything else. And I actually feel sorry for the people who are out there like, we're going to kick ass. Going to kick ass to get my desires. Dude, you're so lost. It's such folly, right? And dude, I know I've been there too, right? And I've got desires. I've still got desires, you know. So the thing is as long as it's conscious and carefully thought of. But the truth is that if you find that you've got to do lots of like affirmations and repetitions to get something you want, I think probably what you need to do is you just need to spend more time like really meditating on the nature of your desires, right? Um, and that's a much more valuable place to be. I'm sorry to hear that about your grandfather. Um, and that's amazing. You can't feel his emotions. I'm still really emotional. You know, like I get really emotional. Like it's my son's birthday today, and oh man, I just get really emotional just thinking about him. You know, just is great. But so I don't think you have to disconnect. I think you can be conscious. You can be conscious. Although, I mean, you're going to go through processes like this where you disconnect with stuff. You know, I was talking to someone the other day. You know, and it's like a lot of times I'm walking through town and I don't even know which country I'm in. I'm like, where am I? Right? I forget which city I'm in, and it's just where it's like it could be anywhere, right? It's just this sort of like conscious perambulation through through a projected reality. It's crazy, dude. But if you look at the David Hawkins map, you look at the Tree of Life, you look at the Order of the Jewel, which I haven't really discussed, and the reason I don't really talk about it because it's kind of like something you have to do one on one with people, and I think the way the Order of the Jewel has to work is basically I have to initiate because it's a tantric thing. So I think basically I'm gonna have to initiate a bunch of women into doing the Order of the Jewel, and then they initiate men, right? I've done it with a couple of guys, but it's just not really, you know, the thing is, it's an intimacy thing, right? And it doesn't, you don't have to get naked or anything like that, but there's a certain um, mutual focus on what sensuality is, you know? Yeah, Jacob. In that sense, then yeah, the best thing you can do if you want desires in line with your higher self, in my opinion, the best thing you can do is pray, and it's not just pray, but it's. I don't even think the quality of prayer has to be sincerity, right? Sincerity. Like for example, a few years ago, I was meditating into the root chakra, right? And there's times when I'm meditating where everything sort of just goes bonkers, right? Or not bonkers, it doesn't feel crazy. It just like there's a shift in the state of reality, right? It goes like trans-dimensional or whatever, right? And in those times, um, and even this morning this was happening, it's like if you become really sincere in consciousness, the presence of absolute sincerity in consciousness is probably the highest moment in human life, right? that kind of like, I didn't believe in any of this stuff years ago, and I remember like I was kind of like living a crazy life, just boozing and going to clubs and all this kind of stuff. And I remember one night I was driving into town and I was parking the car, and it was just going to be a night of like women and drinks and stuff, and it was going to be like, it's going to be a great night, but it was just like there was a moment in the parking lot, and for the first time in my life, there was a little moment where I was like, I said a prayer without really thinking about it, and it was just like, is this really what life's about? Just doing this? I'm like, shouldn't there be something like more beautiful about this? And that's when that was the night I met my ex-wife, that night. It was like 30 minutes later, I bumped into her and we ended up having 2 kids together, right? And so that was a very human level, but it was the sincerity of it, it just came out of nowhere. And that also happens like that experience, like if you're in the root chakra or something and you just move into like this sort of sincerity, the sincerity, if you want to blow kundalini out the top of your forehead, sincere prayer to divinity. Like sincere prayer to divinity, right? To divinity. Don't act. The thing is, like, it's easy to talk about the higher self, right? And, that's a great word for it. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's divinity, right? It's something we can never understand. Yeah, Matthias, that what you're saying about being disconnected and attachment, I think that's, it's funny, right? Like, I was talking to this girl the other night, and she was saying to me, she's like, I'm sick of being alone. She's like, she's gonna like download some dating apps and talk to people. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I was like, I had some dating apps for a while, and it's like I just can't even do it anymore because like you've got to pretend. It's like it's yeah, it's like why bother? Because at the end of the day, just in terms of like connecting to people, like whoever I'm with has to come to terms with this flow of kundalini. Most girls you meet are like, what you do for a job, right? And that's cool, but it's like this. Not many people are ready to hear about how you can use sensuality as a pivot into divinity, right? It's pretty esoteric, right? It's pretty esoteric. So in the end of the day, what are you going to do, right? It's just, it's out there. But the thing is, it's the truth. But people are just not ready for it generally, which is one of the reasons why I find like Mooji's invitation is so attractive, because it's not esoteric, right? So actually part of what I'm planning and doing in this video is I'm planning and doing the invitation, right? That's part of the plan on this video, which I've never done before. But I made some notes. I wrote down, I was making notes as he was talking because like I said, I kind of want to like embody the invitation. And the thing is like when I do the Order of the Jewel, which is a highly energetic, sensual, focused meditation, what happens during that meditation is that you and the other person share spaces of consciousness which are incredibly intimate, right? And what sometimes happens is, especially with women, is that it becomes really sexual, right? It becomes really sexual. And they kind of expect you to be sexual with them. But that's the discipline is to remember that it's not about that, right? I had a girl who was like really hot and she was like getting crazy. And I'm like, no, focus on consciousness, right? But you're human and the attraction's there. And the attraction's wanted. You want the attraction because that superpowers the medium of intimacy. That enables a transmission. But much like Mooji in his invitation, pulls the structures of awareness, or not start. He pulls the structures of thinking away, right, to focus on the actual experience at that moment, right, and then he carefully asks questions and queries into the experience, and that's what becomes the channel into pure awareness. So that's kind of what I do with the Order of the Jewel too. The sexual central aspect of it is really just it's a fun dynamic to pull consciousness, pull the mind. It pulls the mind into a magnetic space where consciousness can be 100% focused, absolutely 100% focused, and that's when you release it, right? It's so fucking awesome. It's so fucking awesome, man. I can't even tell you how awesome it is, right? Because the energy is infinite. It's infinite energy. It's infinite energy flowing through a point of consciousness, and you can share it with somebody. It's amazing, right? And so you're both sitting there with this just like a laser, right? And then you pull out. But it's like I said, this is esoteric, right? Kundalini is esoteric. Pure awareness is pretty approachable, right? I'm just reading Matthias's comments here about about his ex-girlfriend, right? Yeah, dude. This is the thing, you get these spiritual girls and vegan dolls, right? Not pulling out. It's not pulling out. It's just fucking holding it there, right? And it's not even, and this is all consciousness. It's just consciousness, right? It's just holding the conscious awareness in that space, right? Yeah, that's my least favorite thing to do, vegan dolls, right? So, but in the practice of conscious awareness, sure. Um, the Mooji thing is really interesting. So I said I was going to sort of try and do this invitation. So I'm going to try and do it now. So I'm not going to listen to you talk for a couple of seconds just so I can do this. It's actually fairly detailed, especially the way I've done it. Actually, let me just hold on a second. I'm just trying to organize here so I can see what I'm doing. That's not what I want. Here it is. Okay. So this is my first attempt to present Mooji's invitation. So the idea is over time I'm going to make it my invitation. So part of the reason I'm doing this is because I sort of want to memorize like how Mooji does this, because I think he's a brilliant teacher. I mean, brilliant teacher. He's just really fluent in the simple language of moving into pure awareness. Like every time I listen to Mooji, it just boom. It's like, oh, there it is. And it's so easy to forget about it because you get caught up in the day, or you get caught up with all these esoteric Kundalini practices, right? Yeah, I mean, esoteric Kundalini practices. This morning, or was it yesterday? Yesterday morning, I'm meditating on these concepts, and the whole ceremony emerged. It's this whole, and it's really esoteric. I'm just looking at the energy, and the whole system, whole ceremonial practice emerges about, yeah, I gotta develop it, I guess, but I mean, it's just crazy. These are like these things which emerge from energy. It's just amazing. I mean, nobody even knows this exists. The thing is, nobody knows this stuff exists, and it like controls your life, whether you know it or not, And so yeah. Mooji stuff's so much more approachable. It's funny. And like Mooji, one of my problems with Mooji, he doesn't really seem to appreciate Kundalini, right? And so you can move if there's a lot of people like Mooji's got a huge following, and maybe I'd say most of the people following him haven't moved into pure awareness, but you know they get the vibe that there's something going on, so they want to be part of the experience, but they're not actually moving into that state. Half, probably less. So, but he's clearly impacted a lot of people, and I've done transmissions with a bunch of people who've worked with Mooji. You know, I mean, so right, Kundalini more like it, right? Okay. Dude, the problem is I'm going to spoof Mooji here doing this. Like if I start reading, because I've actually written down a lot of what he talked about, right? So here's what Mooji says. He's like, okay, while we're here, I got to put this into my own kind of words here. What we're going to try and do, we're going to do meditation together, you guys. Transmission, right? You can't do that and pull out at the same time. So I got to put this whole thing into my own vibe here. So it's kind of like a meditation we're going to do together, right? And so in this moment, just for a few moments, we're not going to allow ourselves to think about the past, right? We're going to just block that just for a few minutes, and we're going to not think about the future. And just for a little bit of time, we're just going to try and close that stuff off and just focus on what's happening right now, right? And it's like a habit of our mind that we do engage with these stuff, right? We look at the past and we look at the future. We get desires or things that have happened, old girlfriends. But just for this moment, we're just going to like calm the mind down. And you know, once we're finished with this little exercise, we can go back and pick that stuff up again. There's no problem. But just for this moment, we're going to not think about that, right? And just be calm. And so normally there's like shapes and memories and thoughts and pictures which are associated with these ideas. And those pull us away from just this moment. So we're just trying to close that off and just focus on what it would be like if there was none of that going on, right? And when we do that, the dog day meditation, seriously, dude, right? So when we do that, dude, those fucking dogs. Well, I'm just going to go through it anyway. So it's not going to be very successful, those dogs, man, right? It's not going to be successful with dogs barking, but you know. Anyway, as you like eliminate the past and the future, you're just focusing in the moment, and then we try and, you know, if we see images or thoughts coming up, we just say, listen, just for a little bit, let's just shut that down, right? And we'll start noticing that, you know, okay, there's not so many thoughts, but you know, we're still here, like our body's still here, our senses are still here, right? My little secret is it's kind of cold, so I've actually got an electric blanket on my chair here, so it's really warm, so I can still feel that, right? It's just this beautiful warmth, and like, so the senses are still here, so that hasn't gone away. We're just saying, just for a minute, we're not going to think about the past and the future, right? And just sort of sense that feeling, like of whatever's feeling we have at the moment. Just calmness, not thinking about bills, not thinking about exes, just calmness, right? And so the idea is once we take all that stuff away, we've taken away all that stuff, then what is still here, right? We're obviously still here, but we're not thinking about the past, the future anymore, but there's still something here, right? And so what is that? Now, I think part of this is you ask questions, but you're not looking for the answers, right? The thing is that when you engage with answers, that's the mind kicking in again. So the thing is just to ask the questions. I think the way Mooji says this is like, he's like, don't look for an explanation because the mind will jump in and start going off. So now that all the stuff's gone, just sort of feel this, and then just ask yourself: is there like a shape to what's left? Does it have a shape? Is it a belief? Is it something you believe in, or is it just like a sensation of awareness? Is it male or female or whatever? Does this sensation, is it colorful or does it have a design? Now we've already eliminated like images and thought, so it's just a space, really. Are we creating this space? No. Are we provoking or sustaining this space? No. So this space is just, it's just here. So this is the space where things emerge into or emerge from. Now, did this space appear from somewhere? The truth is, it's always there, right? It's just always there. We're just not aware of it because we're so busy focused on the thoughts. But this space is actually there all the time. I'm telling you that. The thing is to do is ask, right? So does it appear? Is there an edge to it? Is there a boundary to it? No, well, I feel compelled to tell you, right? Because that's the way I run this channel. But the thing with this is not to tell people. It's just to ask the questions. It's the inquiry. The inquiry is the key thing here. Does this sensation, is it happy or sad? Is it, does it have an ending to it? Like, is it born? Does it die? Where did it come from? Like, where is this? It's just this space of awareness. And what's interesting about this space of awareness is it's just here. And it's completely accessible. There's nothing esoteric about it. There's no knowledge needed. You don't have to go to a library to find out about it. You don't have to read a book or discover the meaning of chakras or Sanskrit or the petals. You just become aware of reality as it is right now. And reality minus the structures of the mind. And this spaciousness, it, does it have an inside or an outside? Now, all we really know is we've stopped thinking. We've said to ourselves that we're going to like not have thoughts about the past or desires of the future. We're just for a little small amount of time going to push those to the side, and we're just going to sit in a space. And what we feel is this idea that maybe just sitting in space, we're still here, even though there's no thoughts. So this feeling still feels like me. So we keep asking, we keep querying the space, you know? Is there a bottom to it or a top? Where is this space? Is it far away from me? That's really a powerful one there. Is the space far away from you? Or is it close? Is the space so close that it's you? So if that was you, that would mean you wouldn't be your quirky sense of humor. It wouldn't be your income or your job. It would just be the sensation of awareness. Is it destructible? Is it imagined? Now, as you're aware of the space, try and get rid of it. Now, maybe one way to get rid of it is to try and let thoughts and ideas come in again. But that doesn't get rid of it. That just populates it, right? But the feeling of just sitting in this space is so relaxing and peaceful. And thinking doesn't actually get rid of it. And moods don't hide it. And what happens is the more that you focus on the space, over time, the more the space will make its presence aware in your life. And what's interesting about this space is actually it's like the primary connection with divinity, first person. So as we come to the close of this little meditation, you have to wonder, you know, like, okay, do I want to start bringing in all the mind stuff again and start worrying about bills and worrying about axes and dynamics of relationships and world situations and politics and all this stuff? Or just sitting in that space is so amazing. because when you find that space, you are actually alone with all that is eternal and everlasting. What's interesting about this, of course, is that this space exists at all moments of your life. Now, we're just becoming aware of it right now in this short meditation, but it's actually there all the time. And so the trick with this is, as you're living your normal life, is to just become aware of it. Even if you're doing something simple like picking up a cell phone, like, where's the space? Like, just try and locate the space, because what happens is our mind has a limited bandwidth, and as contents move into the space, you'll focus on the contents, and that is it. Where's the space? Okay, I think I'm done with the meditation here. It actually felt really good for me. I don't know about anybody else. I think everybody else left, so that speaks volumes already then. But so awesome. The one thing about that, of course, is its approachability. You know, it's a really approachable meditation. Hi, Joe Mama, if you're still here. It's really approachable by all people and very social. The problem with the art of the jewel is it's so esoteric, right, Matthias? I'll tell you something, Matthias. You know, on YouTube, Mooji has hundreds of videos, and he's got very long ones, satsangs, where he does like 3 or 4 hours. Dude, it's amazing. Every single people, like people go up in the middle of the satsang and say, listen, Mooji, blah, blah, blah. And he guides every single one of them to this space. So he just talks about their life, and then he guides everybody to this space. It's unbelievable. He's such a good teacher. And the reason he's such a good teacher is because it's common language. There's nothing esoteric about it. And I think the thing is that, I mean, I've got like mixed feelings about it, because like this space, I mean, I associate this space as kind of like Shiva. To me, that is Shiva, right? And I think it's a really good space for human consciousness to go into, right? It's a beautiful space of consciousness. I think one of the things with Kundalini is that there are so many extraordinary modalities of consciousness. It's extraordinary what happens. Like there's things that happen with Kundalini, and this is one of the things that people say. Well, one of the things with people who are enlightened in this way is they think this is it, and I can understand why they feel that way, because there's something gorgeous about this, right? But if you truly evoke Krishna or Ganesha or Lakshmi or Shiva, the spaces of consciousness, like the space you move into, it's astonishing. So, I mean, it's an interesting dichotomy, because, you know, these, because clearly this space which is really, is basically contiguous, or it's the same space as rasa, right? And well, here's the funny thing is, like, you're the only one in that space, is true. I think what happens though, Matthias, is like, the more this is really interesting. The whole idea of this, and this actually ties into some of Bardon's practices, because like Bardon in Initiation to Hermetics, he's got practices just like this. So some of the practices in Initiation to Hermetics, and Mooji talks about this too, is that the more you move into the space, the more you start realizing there's no boundaries in it, right? And so there's no boundaries, and what you start realizing is all of a sudden your awareness, you'll start feeling your awareness in other things. So Bardon's got a lot of practices where you move your consciousness into the size of the room, right? or into an object, or into the whole universe. And it's basically the same thing, but it's a more sort of applied method of sort of sensing awareness. Is what it is, right? Um, it's absolutely so profound and beautiful. It's amazing. It's such an amazing privilege to have the possibility to understand this wisdom. I mean, it's such a blessing. It blows my mind, right? It blows. Dude, thank you, Julian, for making me sensitive to this, and thanks, Krister, for opening the door on that, and Chris Mitchell. Um, Yeah, Jacob, the binaural stuff doesn't really work for me that much. I think it works, and somebody gifted me a whole bunch of that stuff. I've got it on Dropbox. I can put a link on if you're interested. I'll have a look. I don't know how my internet is right now. Let me just look. I got like all the binaural. Oh no, it's not binaural. Do you know what it is? It's the Monroe Institute stuff I've got, right? That's what I've got. But it's binaural, right? But yeah, I mean, some people find it. I just don't like listening to stuff. I just like working with consciousness itself. I'm not interested in having external inputs, um exactly, Matthias. Like the it's easy for me to talk about this stuff, and I think, I talk about this stuff all the time because I love talking about it, and because nobody speaks about stuff on a deep level, I guess. And but the truth is I wouldn't be able to know about this either unless certain people had shared this with me, particularly Julian. Because I think the thing with Julian was he what happens is, I was saying, with the Order of the Jewel stuff, there's a layer of intimacy. So the intimacy is the medium of transmission. But I think with Julian, and even with Christianity, the medium of transmission is friendship, right? Yeah, vegan dolls. I love ASMR. I haven't listened to it in a long time. Before I get into all the ayahuasca stuff, I was really deep into the ASMR stuff, just for relaxation. I was doing a lot of traveling on buses and stuff, to Santiago and stuff, and it was just it was long hours. Sometimes it was 4 or 5 hours a day in a bus. So I just put on ASMR, and it was so awesome. I loved that stuff, man. It was great. Um, I'm just looking to see if I've got the what, I've got this stuff, the binaural beats. This guy Brandon gifted me a lot of pretty much all the Monroe Institute stuff, I think it was. Um, but I don't really need to. I don't need to listen to stuff to go in. I mean, I can go into altered states of consciousness literally in about 30 seconds, just from focus of energy. And the funny thing is, these days I tend not to go into altered states that much. I did this morning and yesterday, but usually, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get into this space of clean awareness, right? Yeah. Well, the thing is, Matthias, my voice was the only input, but the thing is just is to learn it enough to do it by yourself, and to do it all the time. And this actually happens a lot with me. A lot of times when I go pick up my stepdaughter at work, I go down there and I usually got to wait for 30 minutes in the parking lot, and I'm sitting there, and then it's just wait, there's an image of a guy in a car outside of a shopping center. And it just, everything just becomes these images, and it's becoming aware of this structure, and where's the meaning, and it's just, dude, it's just rasa, Matthias. It's fucking rasa, dude. And I think rasa, yeah. So I think some people who do the rasa, I don't know. I mean, Kundalini is the challenge, I think, right? Kundalini is challenging. Even this is challenging because, when you go into that state, it really, because you can go into the state, but like all of a sudden you got to come to terms with the idea that this field of awareness, it puts into question everything you think of as you, right? So it's like the person you thought is you is not actually who you are. So then the question is, then what is this? Because there's a whole bunch of behaviors and energy structures which I have clearly identified as Scott my whole life, right? Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know much, Jacob, but I've got a friend who's a very high level like Mason, and he was trying to get me involved in the Masons because he basically told me that like 99% of the Masons don't actually know what's happening, right? So there's a small number of Masons who actually have knowledge, but the truth is the Masons, some Masons will know what I'm talking about here, but yeah, divine knowledge is divine knowledge. That divine knowledge is being shared at an individual level, right? The truth is being shared on an individual level with your awareness. So if you're in a social group doing that, then I think that's got other purposes, right? I mean that's got purposes of who knows what else, right? Because there are no mystical secrets of the Freemasons. There are mystical secrets. They do not belong to the Freemasons, right? They're just a group of people, right? All this stuff's available to all people. Anybody can access this information. I think the trick is the trick is Kundalini. Like once you have access to Kundalini, everything's available, right? So basically, all you have to do is, I mean, literally, I'll meditate, and it feels stupid saying this because most of the time, I'm like in denial about this, walking around like a goofball human, right? But for an hour or a couple of hours a day, I'll sit down and meditate, and during that time, and it'll start off kind of slow. You start meditating, and you're like, oh, your mind's going, and then you get into the zone, and then conscious awareness is like a laser. It can pierce through anything, and it's astonishing. But there's a lot of people who think that this is to be used for manifesting and gaining power or whatever, right? That's part of the problem in the world. And for me, at least, I'm not going to do that, right? And even though, like, I've been using this sort of sensual technique to push into pure consciousness, uh, I will never, well, I will never use that uh, to take advantage of anybody. The problem is with that is that like when like the problem is that you're dealing with powers that are higher than yourself is what happens. So what happens is when you form an energy bridge with somebody, there's not really, it's sort of out of your hands what happens. It's not Scott doing stuff anymore. It's like there's energy transmissions. It's not me. And this is the whole thing. This is why it's important to go into the sort of the spaciousness thing, because because identity means something, right? Identity, I am the self, means something. This is political. I'm speaking of this from a spiritual aspect, but this has massive political implications too, in terms of like our modern world and like saying that men can be women and women can be men. I mean, this stuff is all, it means something, right? Love isn't love, right? There's identity has significance, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I've really ever struggled with relationships, Matthias. You know, like as far as like interpersonal relationships, I pretty much get along with everybody I meet. Usually with the ladies, I get along with women pretty easily, generally, right? I mean, you just if you got sexual attraction, I don't find communicating with people difficult on any level. To be honest with you, I find it really easy. Um, what tends to happen is other people have problems with it, right? So then you meet people who are like narcissistic or bipolar or gaslighting or whatever, and it's like, here we go, right? Um, I think part of that's not because of enlightenment or anything. It's just because like, well, we've all got a process, right? We've all got a process. I certainly screwed up a lot when I was younger, right? I did a lot of stupid shit with women when I was younger, like and you think you hope you can get better. Yeah, I mean, listen, your relationship fall apart. I've had that too. For a while that happened, but and like I'm not really with anybody now or anything. It's just because I just don't even know how to like approach it. I guess and then it's like, but that's not new. That's not. This has nothing to do with like awareness or anything. It's just like I just don't really want to deal with people's bullshit. So, but who knows? Who knows, man? Um, I think what was that? Let me get some. These maps, like what I started out there with that David Hawkins map of consciousness, right? They're really simple, and there's these really simple sort of basic ideas, like like if you think more about this stuff, then that will help you. Like if you're full of fear and shame, then that's bad, and it's actually a really good guidepost for for like where you're at, and maybe just becoming aware of it at that level can be helpful. Well, that's one of the things that I noticed a lot was after like I started breaking through with the Kundalini stuff. It was like I was getting like demonic attacks and like spiritual stuff and like all this really negative stuff, and it was like, why? Why is this happening, right? Because I'm not like a super bad person. Why? But then you're like, okay, in retrospect, I could look back at the David Hawkins thing and say, okay, there's shame and there's anger, but it's not on the conscious level. It's all this sort of unconscious, material, inner child stuff, right? The inner child, that inner child stuff is so compressed. And I think the best thing from that book, The Presence Process, is the whole idea that like the inner child, when you were a child and had these traumatic events, no matter how small they weren't able to be verbalized or intellectualized, so they're stored literally in the emotional body. That information is so powerful to me. And what's funny is you see it playing out in other people too. I really notice that in other people now too, just like watching their emotional bodies act out, right? Yeah, well, the David Hawkins, I think he's yeah, vegan dolls, Mooji. David Hawkins, I think he's in this. I think he gets esoteric too. He's got this simple map, but his books are long-winded and everything. I think Mooji's great because, like, what I just did with the Mooji stuff here with that little meditation, that's as far as Mooji goes. It's just that. It doesn't go any further. Now, I think what Mooji's actually drawing, like I said, Mooji's just drawing out. Well, he would tell you not to talk about it, not to think about it. Just contemplate the vibe, right? Don't try and analyze it with words. I would say it's Shiva, right? And I think what the Order of the Jewel and what the Tree of Life, what all these things are doing is they're basically mapping like I mean, I'm not sure exactly how this works, but I mean, I guess that sometimes I think about it, if there was a huge sphere of divinity and there was rays of lightning coming out of that, like one ray might represent like the tree of life, right? And so it's that. So what the tree of life, what it's doing is it's mapping the emergence of. I mean, this is not new knowledge. This is like everybody says this. It's mapping the emergence of divinity down to the physical level, right? Yeah, Matthias, I think that's fair enough. I mean, I was really sensitive with the Clipoth stuff because I like that demon stuff's too much, but yeah, actually, this was really interesting. I did that transmission the other day, and I'm gonna have to quit soon. By the way, I'm getting really tired for some reason. But I did that transmission the other day, and the transmission is it's metaphoric. It's really sexual, but it's metaphoric, right? It's a sort of metaphoric thing. But like I was saying to you, like there's this thing there's this thing with the like yeah, I don't want to get into the details of it. It's too intimate, but like there's at the end of it, the girl was like, she's like, when you were down in the root chakra, she's like, I was sure Kelly was going to come out with her tongue out and just start going crazy, And that was like, it was such a poignant moment for me because, in like, for example, like lust in Buddhism is a hindrance, in Christianity it's a sin, in the Bhagavad Gita it's a sin, right? It's what it is, vegan dolls. Come on, right? I mean, it's totally in the root chakra, but Kali Kali is lustful, right? She represents this, but she also destroys demons, right? And there's this like Kali is this, it's funny because I've never really been into Kali before, but like that really was so poignant thinking about that afterwards. So that's why I've been doing the Kali sadhana. It's it's just trying to get in touch more with that energy and like and using it as a way of understanding it more. Wow, obviously a wave of like complete tiredness came over me here, guys. So I'm going to stop the transmission here. Transmission, like the electronic transmission. Whew, what happened? I get really tired. All of a sudden, I just want to go to bed, man. That's crazy. Um. Anyway, and vegan dolls. What are you talking about down the root chakra? Come on, this is like standard stuff going to the root chakra. Really standard, right? Okay, you guys. I'm out of here. I get really tired here. So take care. I'll talk to you. Probably I'm doing it like once a month right now, right? Videos. So I mean, I've just been too busy to do other stuff, So